The market was loud, filled with voices that had no mercy. Traders shouted prices, buyers laughed at the misery of others, and cages rattled with weak cries. In the center of this cruel place stood an alien mother, her arms wrapped around a thin, trembling child. Her eyes were tired, her body weak, but her spirit still clung to one thing: her child's life. She had nothing left. No coins, no food, no family. Hunger had stolen her strength. Fear had stolen her dignity, but her child still breathed, still looked up at her with wide eyes, hoping for a miracle. And so, the mother made the only choice left. She stepped onto the platform, in front of the crowd, and offered herself. "I will serve," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Take me, but feed my child." The crowd burst into laughter. Some clapped mockingly. Others shouted cruel jokes. "She sells herself for crumbs," one man jeered. "Who would pay for such a broken creature?" Her cheeks burned with shame, but she did not move. The child clung tighter to her torn dress, hiding their face in her side. The mother closed her eyes, forcing herself to stay upright. She told herself it didn't matter if they mocked her. What mattered was that her child would eat. The auctioneer smirked, lifting his hand to silence the crowd. "A rare offer," he shouted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Not a slave, not a fighter, just a desperate mother. Who dares waste credits on this?" For a moment, silence fell. No one raised a hand. No one offered a coin. The mother felt her knees weaken, but she held on. If no one bought her, then both she and her child would starve before sunrise. Then, a sound, a voice, calm, steady, and unlike the rest. "I will take her." The crowd turned. At the back of the market, standing apart from the others, was a human man. His clothes were simple, his face hard to read. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes not filled with mockery but with something the mother could not understand. The auctioneer blinked. "A human? You want this?" "Yes," the man said firmly. The crowd roared with laughter again. "A fool!" someone shouted. "Humans don't know value," another cried. "He wastes his money." But the human ignored them all. He dropped a small pouch onto the auctioneer's table. The sound of coins silenced the jeers for a moment. The auctioneer picked it up, weighed it, and smirked. "She's yours," he declared. The mother froze, her heart pounding. This was it. Her choice was sealed. She whispered to her child, "Be strong, little one." She braced herself for rough hands, for cruelty, for the nightmare she had agreed to step into. But when the human reached her, he did not grab her like property. Instead, he looked into her eyes and asked a single question. "Do you want to live?" The mother gasped softly. She could not answer. Her lips trembled, her voice broken. No one had ever asked her that before. To live? She had sold herself for death, not life. The human knelt slightly, his voice low but strong. "I will not harm you, but you must choose. Do you want to live?" The child peeked from behind the mother's dress, staring at the strange man. His presence felt different. No anger, no cruelty, only something heavy and steady, like a shield. The mother swallowed hard. She could not believe him. It had to be a trick. Yet for a heartbeat, hope sparked inside her chest. A dangerous, painful hope. The crowd shouted again, growing restless. "Take her and leave," someone yelled. "Or are you too soft, human?" The man stood tall, ignoring them. He extended his hand, not to drag her, but to invite her. His eyes did not look at her body like the others. They looked at her soul. The mother's breath shook. Her child's small hand gripped her tighter, silently pleading. Slowly, with trembling fingers, she placed her hand in the human's. Gasps echoed around the market. Some laughed louder, others muttered angrily. The auctioneer only waved them away. "She's his problem now," he said. The human turned, guiding the mother and child away from the noise, away from the eyes that had mocked them. The mother's steps were unsteady, her heart torn between terror and confusion. Behind them, the laughter of the crowd still rang out. But ahead, for the first time in years, there was silence. The mother did not yet know who this human was. She did not yet know why he had chosen her, why he had wasted his coins on someone broken and worthless in the eyes of others. But one thing was certain. Her story was no longer in the market's hands. It had just taken a turn she never expected, and that was the beginning of everything. The night air was cold as the human led the alien mother and her child away from the noisy market. The streets grew quieter with every step. The mother's bare feet stumbled on the rough ground, but she said nothing. She kept her head down, waiting for the moment his kindness would break, waiting for the cruelty she was sure must come. Her child, still clinging to her dress, kept looking up at the strange human. The little one's eyes showed fear, but also curiosity. Why had he bought them? Why had he not struck her or shouted or demanded something? The silence was heavier than chains. Finally, the human stopped before a small cabin on the edge of the town. It was simple, wooden walls, a single lantern glowing faintly inside. He pushed the door open and gestured for them to enter. The mother hesitated. She had been in many places before, dark cells, dusty alleys, cold barns. None of them had ever been safe. Stepping into this cabin felt like walking into another trap. Still, her child tugged her hand, urging her forward. She bent her head and entered. Inside, the cabin was warm. A small fire burned in the hearth. The air smelled of bread and herbs. A wooden table stood at the center, with bowls and a loaf of bread waiting. Her stomach twisted painfully at the smell of food. Hunger clawed inside her, but she forced herself to stay still. Her child's wide eyes stared at the bread as if it were treasure. The human closed the door behind them. For a long moment there was only silence. Then he spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Sit." The mother slowly lowered herself onto a bench, pulling her child onto her lap. Her hands trembled as she waited for the command she feared. But instead, the human walked to the table, broke the bread, and placed half before them. "Eat," he said simply. The mother froze. Her breath caught in her chest. She looked at the bread, then at him. This was not what she expected. Not at all. Her child reached eagerly, but she stopped them, whispering, "Wait." She narrowed her eyes at the human. "Why?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Because you need it," he replied. The answer was too simple, too strange. No one ever gave without taking. No one ever cared if she or her child needed anything. She shook her head slowly. "You bought me. What do you want?" The human's eyes met hers. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried no cruelty. "I want you to live." Her heart pounded. She gripped the child tighter. "No one wants that," she whispered bitterly. "I do." The words made her chest ache. She wanted to believe them, but her life had taught her otherwise. Her scars, her pain, all reminded her that kindness always had a price. The child, no longer able to resist, reached for the bread again. This time the mother let them take it. The little one bit into it hungrily, crumbs falling onto the bench. Their small eyes closed in relief at the taste. The mother's throat tightened as she watched. The human did not move to stop them. He only leaned back against the wall, arms folded as if watching over them. The mother finally broke off a piece and placed it in her mouth. The bread was soft, warm. Tears stung her eyes. It was the first real food she had tasted in days. Still, her fear remained. She swallowed hard and looked at him again. "If not pain, then why? Tell me the truth." The human tilted his head. "You offered yourself to save your child. That is not weakness, that is strength. No one else in that market saw it. But I did." Her lips parted, but no words came. Strength? No one had ever called her strong. To them, she was only desperate, worthless, weak. She shook her head. "You don't know me." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But I know enough." You still fight to live. That is more than most. The fire crackled softly between them. Her child leaned against her side, chewing the last piece of bread, finally drifting into sleep. She stroked their hair gently, her heart torn. She whispered, almost too softly, "You will change your mind. They always do." The human pushed away from the wall and walked closer. She stiffened, bracing herself, but he did not raise a hand. Instead, he crouched so he could meet her eyes. "I will not harm you," he said firmly. "Not tonight, not ever. I chose you, not because you were sold, but because you were broken, and broken things can be mended." Her breath caught. The osir words struck deeper than any blade. She felt her tears spill, hot and unstoppable. She turned her face away, ashamed of her weakness. The human rose and stepped back, giving her space. He set a blanket on the bench beside her. "Rest. Tomorrow. You'll need strength." The mother stared at the blanket, then at him. She wanted to ask more, to demand the truth, to understand why this human saw her differently. But her body was too tired, her mind too heavy. Slowly, she pulled the blanket over herself and her child. Her eyes closed, though her heart still raced, with questions. In the quiet of that small cabin, for the first time in years, she fell asleep without chains. And in the shadows, the human kept watch. The morning light crept through the small cracks in the wooden walls. The alien mother opened her eyes slowly, unsure if she was still alive. For a moment, she panicked. Where was she? Why was it quiet? Then her gaze fell on the small body resting against her, her child wrapped in the blanket, sleeping peacefully. Her heart squeezed. They had survived the night. No chains, no shouts, no cruel hands, only silence and warmth. Still, her fear whispered inside her. It is not real. It cannot last. She turned her head and saw him, the human. He was sitting by the fire, sharpening, a blade with slow, steady strokes. His eyes were focused, his face unreadable. She stiffened, her body tensing. She remembered his words from the night before. "I will not harm you. Not tonight. Not ever." But words were just air. She had learned never to trust them. The child stirred, rubbing their eyes. "Mama, food?" they whispered. The mother froze. Hunger had never left them. Even after last night's bread, their stomachs still ached. She pulled the child close, whispering, "Shh, don't ask. We should not anger him." The human looked up. His eyes met hers, then shifted to the child. Without a word, he rose, walked to a small shelf, and brought down a pot. He poured water into it, added dried roots, and set it above the fire. Soon the air filled with a warm smell, soup. The mother's heart thudded faster. Her mouth watered, but fear battled with it. Why, she thought. Why feed us again? What does he want? When the soup was ready, the human set 3 bowls on the table. He filled them slowly, then placed one before the child, one before the mother, and finally one for himself. "Eat," he said simply. The child did not wait. Their small hands grabbed the bowl, sipping the hot broth eagerly. Their face lit up with joy, steam curling around their cheeks. The mother's eyes burned with tears. She had seen her child starve. She had heard their cries in the night. Now, for the first time in so long, she saw them smile. But she did not touch her own bowl. She kept her hands in her lap, staring at the soup as if it were poison. Slowly, she whispered, "Why?" The human tilted his head. "Because you're hungry." Her voice shook. "Nothing is free." He set down his spoon, looking at her with calm, steady eyes. "It doesn't need to cost you anything." Her breath caught. She wanted to laugh, to cry, to scream. She shook her head, whispering bitterly, "I was sold. I belong to you. You can take whatever you want. Why waste food?" The human leaned forward slightly. "You don't belong to me," he said firmly. "You are not property. You are a mother, and your child needs you alive." Her chest ached. No one had ever said such words to her. Not the traders, not the buyers, not even her own kind. She lowered her gaze, hands trembling. Slowly she picked up the spoon and tasted the soup. It was simple but warm. The heat spread through her empty stomach, and for a moment, she forgot the cruelty of the world outside. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she quickly wiped them away. The human said nothing, only eating his own portion quietly. When the meal was finished, the child leaned against their mother, yawning happily. She kissed their forehead, her heart breaking with confusion. She looked at the human again, her voice trembling. "You are kind, but kindness always ends. Why do this for us?" The human set his empty bowl aside and looked into the fire. His voice was low but strong. "Because someone once saved me. I was lost, broken. They gave me a chance. Now, I give you one." Her eyes widened. She did not know his story, but the weight in his voice told her it was true. He was not just a buyer. He was something else. Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the crackle of fire. For the first time, the mother felt something dangerous inside her chest. Hope. Still, she whispered almost to herself, "If others find out, they will come. They will not allow this." The human's jaw tightened. His hand rested on the blade he had sharpened earlier. "Let them come," he said quietly. "I will protect you." Her breath caught again. Protect. Another word she had forgotten. The child, half asleep, whispered softly, "Mama, he's good." The mother held them, close, her tears silent. She did not know if the child was right. She did not know if this human's promise would last. But in that moment, with food in her stomach and warmth around her, she wanted to believe. The fire burned brighter, the morning light spreading across the cabin. The mother closed her eyes, whispering a prayer she had not spoken in years. Maybe we are safe. For now. But outside, beyond the quiet walls, whispers had already begun to spread. The market had not forgotten. A human had bought an alien mother and treated her with care. To some it was foolishness, to others it was a challenge, and soon the world would come knocking. The day passed slowly inside the small cabin. The alien mother sat quietly by the fire, her child curled up on her lap, finally sleeping with a full stomach. The sound of steady breathing felt like a blessing. For the first time in many nights, her child did not cry from hunger. The human moved around the cabin, silent but purposeful. He carried logs inside, stacked them by the hearth, then checked the wooden shutters on the windows. His movements were careful, steady, almost protective. The mother watched him with cautious eyes. She wanted to understand him, but fear pressed, down heavier than curiosity. When he finally stopped, he looked at her. "Your body," he said calmly. "You are hurt." Her breath caught. She shifted uncomfortably, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I am fine," she whispered. But he didn't believe her. His gaze was steady, not cruel, not demanding, just seeing. Too much seeing. "You limp when you walk," he said quietly. "And you hold your side when you think I do not notice. Show me." Her heart pounded. Memories burned in her mind, hands grabbing her, blows falling, voices laughing as she cried out. She shook her head quickly. "No, you bought me, yes. But you will not touch me." The human's expression did not change. His voice stayed calm. "I will not touch you without your choice. But wounds left untreated can kill. If you want to, live for your child. Let me help." The words struck deep. Live for your child. That was the reason she had sold herself. That was the reason she still breathed. Slowly, her resolve cracked. Her child stirred in their sleep, and the sight of their peaceful face gave her courage she did not feel for herself. With trembling hands, she loosened the edge of the blanket. Her thin arm showed old scars, burned lines, and bruises that had not yet healed. She turned slightly, and he saw the torn fabric on her side, stained faintly with blood from a wound that had reopened. Shame washed over her. She wanted to cover herself again to hide. But the human did not laugh, did not sneer. Instead, he walked to a shelf, pulled down a wooden box, and set it on the table. Inside were cloth bandages, herbs, and a small vial of clear liquid. "Come," he said. She hesitated. Her body shook as she stood, every step heavy with fear. She sat slowly on the bench, clutching the blanket over her chest. He knelt in front of her, not towering, not forcing. "This will sting," he warned. She flinched as he reached forward, but his touch was careful, gentle. He cleaned the wound on her side with the liquid, and pain flared sharp. She bit down on her lip, refusing to cry out. Her hands tightened on the wood of the bench until her knuckles turned white. The human did not rush. He worked steadily, wrapping the wound with clean cloth, pressing it firm but not harsh. His hands were rough from labor, but his care was precise, almost respectful. When it was done, he stepped back and washed his hands in a small bowl of water. "It will heal," he said simply. The mother could not speak. Her chest felt heavy, her throat tight. She had expected cruelty, but instead she was treated as if she mattered. She pulled the blanket around herself again, hiding her tears. Her child woke then, blinking sleepily. They looked between the two adults and asked softly, "Mama, are you better?" The mother forced a small smile and nodded. "Yes, little one. Better." The child yawned and leaned against her again, already drifting back into dreams. The human stood and placed the bandages back in the box. "Scars will remain," he said quietly, "but scars mean survival. They are not weakness." His words cut through her like a blade. Not weakness. She had been told she was weak so many times that she believed it. But here, in this cabin, a human saw her differently. Her lips trembled. She whispered almost without realizing, "Why do you see me this way?" He looked at her with calm eyes. "Because you are more than what was done to you." Silence filled the cabin. The fire popped softly. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. The mother lowered her gaze, tears sliding down her cheeks silently. She hated herself for crying, yet she could not stop. Something inside her, something long buried, was waking. A piece of her that believed she could be more than a broken slave. Tut. Human did not press her for answers. He returned to his chair by the fire, sharpening his blade again, his presence steady and strong. The mother held her child close, her heart beating fast. She still did not fully trust him. She still feared what tomorrow might bring. But in this moment, her wounds were tended, her child was safe, and for the first time in years, she felt seen. But outside the cabin, whispers spread like smoke. The market men spoke of the human who wasted his coins. Others muttered of taking the mother back, selling her again, punishing him for his defiance. Danger was coming, and soon his promise to protect her would be tested. The cabin was quiet, but the alien mother could not rest. Her child slept soundly in her arms, the soft rise and fall of their breathing giving her comfort, yet her own eyes refused to close. The fire had burned low. Shadows stretched across. The walls and every creak of the wooden frame made her heart jump. All day she had felt the weight of unseen eyes. Ever since the market, whispers followed them. The laughter of cruel men echoed in her memory. The human is a fool. He wastes his coins. Such men never stayed quiet for long. Sooner or later, they would come. Across the room, the human sat near the door, his back straight, a blade resting across his knees. He did not look tired. His eyes, sharp and steady, watched the shadows as if waiting for something. His calm made her uneasy. How could he sit so still when fear clawed at her chest? At last, she whispered, "They will come for us." The human looked at her, his face unreadable. "Yes," he said simply. Her breath caught. She had hoped he would deny it, tell her she was imagining things. Instead, his certainty chilled her. "Then why keep us here? Why not leave us in the market? Why bring danger to your door?" He leaned back slightly, his voice steady. Because walking away would have been easier. And I do not choose the easy path. Her heart trembled at his words, but fear crushed her again. She lowered her gaze. When they come, they will hurt you, they will take me, they may kill the child. No, he said firmly, his voice cutting through the dark. I will not allow it. She wanted to believe him, but disbelief weighed, heavier. She had seen too many promises shatter, too many kind faces turn cruel. You cannot fight them all, she whispered. Maybe not, he admitted, his eyes narrowing. But they will learn that I do not run. The silence that followed was thick. The mother hugged her child tighter, her thoughts a storm. Hope and dread fought inside her. Hours passed. The fire dimmed to glowing embers. The mother's body grew heavy with exhaustion, but her fear would not let her sleep. Then, she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, crunching steps outside the cabin. Her breath froze. She clutched her child, pressing their face into her chest to keep them quiet. The sound grew closer, circling the cabin. Then came whispers, low voices outside the thin wooden walls. They're here, she breathed, terror shaking her words. The human had already risen. He lifted his blade, his stance steady, his expression calm. Stay behind me, he said. Her knees trembled, but she obeyed, crouching low with her child in the corner of the room. Her heart pounded in her ears as shadows shifted across the window. A knock came, hard, mocking. Open the door, human, a voice barked. We've come for what belongs to us. The mother's blood turned cold. She recognized that voice. It belonged to one of the traders from the market, a man who had once offered her scraps in exchange for humiliation. She had escaped him that night, but now he had returned. The human did not move toward the door. She is not yours, he said loudly, his voice firm. Laughter erupted outside. Another voice sneered. You think you can keep her? She's a slave, bought and sold. You are nothing but a fool playing savior. The mother squeezed her child tighter, tears stinging her eyes. She had known this would happen. No kindness lasted. It always ended in chains. The human's voice thundered back, stronger this time. She is under my protection. Step away. The cabin shook as fists pounded the door. The child whimpered, and the mother covered their mouth gently, her own body shaking. The traders shouted, Come out, human! We will teach you what happens to those who defy us. The human's eyes burned with cold fire. He whispered only 2 words, Stay hidden. Then, in one motion, he lifted the wooden bar and opened the door. The night wind rushed in, carrying the stink of sweat and alcohol. Outside stood 5 men, their faces twisted with greed and anger. Torches flickered in their hands, blades glinted in the dark. The mother gasped softly, covering her child's eyes. She could not bear to watch, but she heard the human's voice, calm and steady even against so many. Leave now. This is your only chance. The men laughed, stepping forward. One spat at his feet. We take what we want. And then steel clashed. The sounds filled the night. Grunts, the scrape of metal, the crack of wood. The mother's heart hammered as she held her child close, praying silently. Every cry, every thud made her flinch. She could not see, but she imagined blood, imagined loss. Then, silence. She dared to open her eyes. The human stood in the doorway, his blade wet, his chest rising and falling with controlled breath. Around him the men lay scattered in the dirt, groaning, broken, their torches extinguished. Her lips parted in shock. He was only one man, yet he had stood against many, and he had not fallen. He turned back inside, his eyes meeting hers. You are safe, he said simply, as if it were nothing. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Her body shook with relief and disbelief. Safe. The word felt unreal. The child, still hiding in her arms, peeked out and whispered, Mama, he saved us. The mother could not speak. She could only nod, her heart trembling with something she could not name, something stronger than fear. But deep inside she knew this night was only the beginning. The world would not forgive what he had done. Others would come, stronger, more dangerous. And yet for the first time she wondered if maybe, just maybe, this human could face them all. The night after the fight was heavy with silence. The alien mother sat in the corner of the cabin, her child asleep in her lap, while the human cleaned his blade slowly, wiping away the last traces of blood. Outside, the groans of the defeated men had faded into the distance. Some crawled away, others were dragged by their companions, but their threat still lingered in the air like smoke. The mother's heart trembled. She whispered, "They will return, with more." The human nodded, his face calm. "Yes. And when they do, I will be ready." Her chest tightened. She could not understand him. Most men would have fled by now, hidden in the mountains, or sold her back to escape the trouble. But this human, he stayed. "Why risk your life?" she asked in a trembling voice. "I am nothing. My child is nothing. Why fight for us?" His eyes lifted from the blade, steady and unshaken. "Because no one else would, and that is reason enough." The words struck her like a storm. She turned away quickly, ashamed of the tears in her eyes. She wanted to argue, to tell him kindness never lasted, but he had already proven otherwise. The following day, the sun rose clear and cold. The human stood outside the cabin, chopping wood, his movement strong and steady. The sound of each strike echoed through the trees. The mother stood in the doorway, holding her child's hand, watching. Every swing of his axe reminded her of the night before, how one man had stood against many, but fear gnawed at her. What if more came? What if this time he did not win? Her child looked up at her and whispered, "Mama, he's strong. He can protect us." She forced a smile, brushing the child's hair gently. "Yes, little one. Strong." Yet inside her heart remained heavy. By evening the danger showed itself again. The distant sound of hooves shook the ground. Dust rose on the horizon. The mother's breath caught. More men, riding hard, their voices shouting. The human stepped back inside the cabin, his face calm but his eyes sharp. He set his axe aside and took up his blade. "Stay inside," he said firmly. The mother clutched her child tightly. Her voice cracked. "You cannot fight them all." He looked at her, and for a moment, the firelight reflected in his eyes like steel. "Then I will die standing, but I will not let them take you." Her knees weakened. No one had ever spoken for her like this. She wanted to beg him to run, to save himself, but the words stuck in her throat. The sound of hooves grew louder. Soon torches appeared between the trees. A dozen riders dismounted outside the cabin, their leader stepping forward with a cruel smile. "You should have stayed quiet, human," the man sneered. "Hand them over, and maybe we let you live." The human stepped outside, the door closing behind him. The mother rushed to the window, clutching her child, watching through the cracks. He stood tall, his blade glinting in the torchlight, facing 12 armed men without flinching. "They are under my protection," he said coldly. "If you want them, you will have to kill me first." The raiders laughed, their weapons flashing. "Then die, fool." And the fight began. Steel clashed against steel, sparks flying into the night. The human moved with precision, each strike fueled not by rage but by resolve. He cut down the first man, then spun to block another, his blade ringing with force. The mother's heart pounded as she held her child close, whispering prayers into their hair. Every scream, every clash outside tore at her soul. She saw him fall, once knees hitting the dirt, but he rose again, striking harder, faster. His body bled, but his will did not break. The raiders cursed, their confidence fading as one by one they fell to the ground, groaning, defeated. The leader's smile twisted into rage. He charged with a roar, swinging his heavy axe toward the human's head. The mother gasped, pressing her child's face into her chest to block the sight. But when she dared to look again, the human stood tall, his blade buried deep in the leader's chest. The raider staggered back, eyes wide with shock, then collapsed into the dirt. Silence fell across the clearing. The human stood breathing heavily, blood dripping from his arm, but his eyes were still sharp, still unbroken. He turned slowly, scanning the fallen men. "Go," he commanded the survivors. "Tell the others. If they come again, they will find the same fate." The men scrambled away, dragging their wounded with them, their courage shattered. The mother opened the door as the human staggered inside, his hand pressed against his bleeding arm. She rushed to him without thinking, guiding him to a chair. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the bandages he had once used for her. "You are hurt," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why do you keep fighting for us?" His voice was rough, but steady. "Because no one else will." She pressed the cloth against his wound, her tears falling onto his skin. For the first time she realized he was not just strong. He was willing to give everything for them. Her child clung to his side, whispering softly, "You saved us again." The mother looked at the human, her heart heavy with fear, gratitude, and something else she dared not name. She had always believed no one would ever fight for her, no one would ever see her as more than a slave. But tonight, under the flicker of firelight, one human had stood against an army, and he had chosen them. And in that choice, her world had begun to change. The cabin was quiet after the storm of battle. The fire burned low, filling the room with soft light. The alien mother sat on the bench, her child asleep against her chest while the human rested in the chair across from her, his arm wrapped in fresh bandages. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence was not empty. It was heavy, filled with everything that had just happened. The mother's eyes stayed on him, searching, trying to understand. He had fought for them, bled for them, and still he sat there as if it were nothing. Finally, her voice broke the silence. "Why?" she whispered, almost too softly. "Why do you keep choosing us?" The human lifted his eyes, steady and calm. "Because you are worth choosing." Her breath caught. She shook her head, clutching her child tighter. "No, I was sold for coins. I was mocked, broken. I was nothing." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze unshakable. "They called you nothing because they feared your strength. You gave yourself up for your child. That is not weakness. That is love. And love is worth more than chains, more than coins, more than all their cruel laughter." Her lips trembled, tears welling in her eyes. No one had ever spoken of her like this. She had lived so long believing she was worthless, only to hear this human call her priceless. The child stirred in her lap, blinking sleepily. "Mama," they whispered. "Are we safe now?" The mother kissed their forehead gently, her tears falling into their hair. "Yes, little one, we are safe." For the first time, the words did not feel like a lie. The human rose slowly despite his injuries and stepped closer. He looked down at the child, then at her. "You do not belong to the market," he said firmly. "You do not belong to me. You are free." Her heart stopped. The word struck her harder than any blade. Free. She had dreamed of it, prayed for it, but never believed it would come. And now, here it was, spoken by the very man who had bought her. Her voice cracked, broken with disbelief. "Free? You don't want me?" His eyes softened. "I don't want a slave. I want a life with you, if you choose it. Not because you are forced, but because you want to stay." The mother's tears spilled freely. She buried her face in her child's hair, shaking with emotion. She remembered the cruel hands, the mocking voices, the endless nights of fear. And now, standing before her, was a man who offered not chains, but love. Slowly, she lifted her head, meeting his gaze. Her voice trembled, but it carried strength. "I do not know how to live free. I do not know how to be anything but broken." The human stepped closer, kneeling before her. He took her hand gently, not forcing, only holding. Then let us learn together. Broken things can be mended. Wounds can heal. And love can grow. Her child's small voice broke the moment. Mama, can we stay with him? Please? The mother's chest ached. She looked at her child, then at the human. Her fear still lingered, but hope burned brighter. For the first time, she believed there might be a future beyond pain. Yes, she whispered, her tears falling like rain. We will stay. The human's lips curved into a faint smile. Then you are no longer alone. From this day forward, you are not mine to own. You are mine to protect, to cherish, to stand beside. The firelight glowed around them as the mother leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his hand. Her child giggled softly, sensing the change in the air, sensing the warmth that filled the cabin. Outside, the world was still cruel, still dangerous. More enemies might come. But inside this small wooden cabin, something stronger than fear had been born. Not chains, not ownership, but love. The mother held her child close and whispered into their ear, "We are free now, truly free." The human rose and placed another log on the fire, the flames leaping higher, pushing back the darkness outside. He looked at the mother and child, his voice steady. Rest now. Tomorrow, we begin a new life. And for the first time in years, the alien mother believed him. She closed her eyes, not in fear, but in peace. Because the story that had begun as a cruel sale in a noisy market had ended not in chains, but in love.